Hi, this is a more in-depth video at the changes in predynastic pottery display that's currently ongoing at the Egypt Center at Swansea University. So a little background before we get into the objects themselves, because the predynastic period is a vast period. The predynastic period is the period before we have dynastic Egypt, so think the Old Kingdom is the beginning of Egyptian history. Predynastic is right before that. So this is where we get the up and coming of people like King Narmer. The predynastic period itself lasted between 5,500 BCE to about 3,100 BCE. The period itself is split into a majority of two separate periods. So you have the Badarian period and then you have the Naqada period. The Naqada period itself is also then split up into three separate periods: Naqada 1, 2, and 3. So let's get looking into the objects. So this is the first object that we're going to look at. It is from the Badarian period, which lasted between 5,500 BCE to about 4,000 BCE. As this is a shard, it most likely would have been part of a bigger vessel, so it may have been only a little bit bigger, or it might have been vastly bigger. We don't know because it is just this little shard. If you look very closely, if the light catches it the right way, if you see those little ripples, that's what's called rippling. Rippling is a type of decoration that would have been done through burnishing. So burnishing is when you're smoothing out a vessel and you take something like a pebble and you smooth it. The way that this was smooth, it gave it that little rippling effect, and if you touch it, you can actually feel the ripples. It's pretty cool. The shard itself was possibly made out of Nile silt. Nile silt is a type of clay or fabric that is found along the Nile, and it is one of the most common use clays in Egypt itself through the predynastic period all the way up until modern day. This might have been part of a type of pottery called blacktop pottery, which would have been a reddish color at the bottom with a black top at the top, and we'll actually look at a blacktop pot later on. And we're gonna go on to the next one. The next object we're looking at is this pot. It is a white cross-lined pot, which was very common during the Naqada 1 period. Naqada 1 lasted between 3,900 BCE to about 3,600-500 BCE. Now, unlike the rippled burnishing we saw in the last pot, this pot is entirely smooth with the exception of these white line decorations. How this would have been done is that the red coating here is most likely a slip, so they would have taken the pot once it was formed and dipped it into a liquid, which would have mostly been made out of probably something like red ochre. And then when that red liquid was dry and possibly fired for the first time, they would then go in with white and paint these decorations on. So the decorations also just aren't on this side of the pot, they're also on the interior rim here, and it's a little bit different because they're little wavy lines. And you do also have almost like the little triangle interspersed in between, and then it's also here as well. Now, unlike the last shard, this is actually made out of a material called marl. Marl is a type of clay that, again, is found along the Nile, but in a very specific locations. So it would be found in places where there's a high concentrate of things like shale and limestone. And it is not as commonly used in Egyptian pottery, but at least in Naqada 1 and, as we will talk about, Naqada 2, it was very common within specific types of pottery. And there are actually still some places in Egypt that are on these marl deposits that still make pottery today. Another interesting thing about this is that while we don't have the introduction of what we consider today as a turning wheel for pottery. The rim of this may have been used, or may have used a kind of sort of wheel that would have been either turned by one hand while the other hand smoothed, or by another person while somebody else smoothed, to get a more even edge around the rim. And on to the next pot. Next up is this pot from Nakata 2, which is from about 3,650 BCE to about 3,300 BCE. Now, this pot is something called decorated ware, decorated pottery, or more commonly D-ware. And it gets its name because of the red decoration on a very flat surface. So unlike the last white cross line pottery or the shard, there is no surface treatment on this. So there's no burnishing, there's no slip. It is just a plain pot with decoration on it. And this would have been very common for D-ware at the time. This one has a boat motif on this side as well as on this side. And it also has little wavy ripples. Another characteristic of this pot is that it has these two little lug handles. So they're just kind of little lugs, and they would have had something like a string go through them to hang it up or to hold on to it better. Now, much like the white cross line pottery, this is made out of marl clay as well. Again, it's not very common anymore to use marl clay, but D-ware specifically uses marl clay. So at least during Nakata 2, marl ware, or pots made out of marl, were a lot more common than in other Nakata periods or Badarian periods or even Egyptian history. So next up is this pot. If you remember when we were talking about the body shard from the Badarian period, I mentioned something called blacktop pottery. This is a blacktop pot. It is from Nakata 2, but since after the Badarian period, blacktop pottery wasn't as common as pots made of, or blacktop pottery was not as common as white cross line pottery or even D-ware. But the existence of this one being from Nakata 2 just kind of shows that while there are more popular pots, you can't go wrong with an oldie. This one specifically is decorated with incised decorations that are in a geometric pattern. So all that means is that before the final firing of the pot, they would take something and just slightly scratch in the decorations. So if you were to run your finger across this, you could feel the little incisions. And geometric just means that the shapes are shapes. The blacktop would have been done by its polishing, but then this part specifically would have had a different type of polish or firing compared to this. And yeah, all right. So this is the last pot that is on display currently. This is from Nakata 3, which was from about 3,300 BCE to about 2,900 BCE. Pots like this would have normally been smooth with no decoration on it besides maybe some incising. And trust me, underneath all of this, it is smooth. This is mostly just signs of wear. So either when it was being used or when it was buried, it had all the stuff gathered on it. Or even after it was found, it could have had this stuff accidentally put on it. So what makes this pot really cool is that if you look here at these two, and also here, these are early hieroglyphs. So Egyptian hieroglyphics came around 3000 BCE. And it would not have been the fully developed language that we see later on in the pyramids or on books of the dead. But these are just early signs. So this one right here, as well as this one, are what is known as Ka signs. So they're just like little lakes. And this one right here is a lateral sign, which is just a long sign. So there you have it. There are the 5 objects that are currently on display in the Changes in Predynastic Pottery display in the Egypt Center. If you are in the Egypt Center watching these videos, go ahead and have a look around at the other displays. There is plenty of blacktop pottery in the pre-dynastic case as well as the pottery case. There's also some decorated pottery or deware in those 2 cases as well. Unfortunately, there is no white cross-line pottery besides the one that is currently on display. And there are plenty of plain decorated pots as well, so enjoy!